We're glad you joined us today. We know the road may feel isolating, but we are here to go along this journey with you and love the call to action. Ruck Buttercup is a podcast hosted by Deployed Love, where we're going to join together and chat about all things military life. So you know the drill. Ruck Buttercup. Hey everybody, we're back with the girl chat, which is my favorite. I don't know about you girls, but I look forward to this all month to just sit and talk to you guys about things that we do in our military life and be able to relate to everybody that listens to our podcast. So today, if you've been following our page, our Deployed Love page, we've been doing PCS stuff all month. So we're here to talk about our PCSs and things that we've gone through. So all of us have been through quite a few, Ashley probably 10 times more than us, but we've all been through quite a few PCSs. Some of us OCONUS, some of us have done them ourselves. So we'll just go ahead and let's see where we've been, like what we've done.
It's so funny. I was actually earlier trying to count how many times I've PCSed over my life. And it's actual PCSing, it's been at least 10 to 14. 10 for sure, but I feel like I'm missing some in there. And I know between those PCSs, I have moved like to different houses or different school districts within those. But with my husband, I have PCSed 3 times. So 3 times as a military spouse, which is crazy to say, but.
So as a military spouse, I'm at 3. I haven't done any obviously before that. So
yeah, we were fortunate. We didn't have to PCS our first military base. Jeremy got to come back to Bragg for his first duty station. So we were already here, which was nice. So if he had gone somewhere else, it would have been 4, but.
Yeah, his duty station, we were only dating when he went to his first duty station. So it wasn't really like an actual PCS per se. I just kind of moved there.
We're at 4 ourselves.
4?
Yeah.
It's not too bad. I know that some spouses, man, they PCS like every couple of years because of their jobs. So I'm glad that 3 or 4 isn't too terrible.
Yeah, well, it depends on your MOS too.
Yeah, because I was going to say we were here at one's duty station for 9.5 years. And then we PCS'd, and then a year later PCS'd, and then a year later PCS'd, and a couple of years later PCS'd.
Which I feel is really common for certain MOSs. Like, like I said, I was, I know for sure 10, but I feel like it's closer to that 14, 15 mark, especially PCS as a kid. Because I went to my middle school, high school years, I went to a different high school every single year, and not a different high school in the same city. Like I was Europe, Texas, Europe, North Carolina. So it definitely happens. I definitely, like, my husband's the complete opposite though. Like he never moved after he hit like elementary school. He was just here at Bragg the whole time with his parents. So it's very different across the board.
Yeah, it definitely is. Because with my husband's Intel, so they have to kind of move around. So they get different people doing the jobs because the jobs are very demanding. So they move around, but it's very small options for their jobs because they're only at certain locations. So I feel like, granted, we only did 9 years, so we got out. And so then we didn't move after that. But I feel like we would have probably bounced back to some of the same bases if we had.
It's a small world.
It is.
It is. I mean, I've been here. I mean, I consider Bragg my home because it's just where I've always come back to. I was born here. My parents were stationed here. I was born here, moved away, came back, moved away, came back several times. So it's a small world. And once you go someplace, most likely coming back to it. Where was your guys' first? I know, Sabrina, you said that Hawaii was technically your guys' first base. Kim, where was yours?
Our first PCS was to Fort Rucker down in Alabama, and it was only 2 hours away for us. So we did a DITY. It was pretty simple. We moved on base, which was our first experience living on base. So that was fun. And then our second PCS was actually for Travis to go on a hardship tour. So I moved back home by myself, and he went to Honduras. And that was really hard because we had to split things for storage, things for me to take, things for him to take. So it was a lot of what's going to go where.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, since I didn't really PCS to Hawaii, we we'd been dating and then we got engaged that summer and I was like, no, this isn't gonna work, especially with he had a deployment coming up. I was like, we have to get married before then. So I just packed my stuff in a couple suitcases and flew out there. We got married there on island and then got the whole process of getting a house on base, and which is a process when you're first like getting onto all this stuff, like all the system. But you got there. So we didn't really PCS.
It is definitely a process. There's a lot to go through. You have to get enrolled in DARES and you have to get your ID and there's a lot to do. And for those who are listening who don't know what a DITY is, that is when you move yourself. That's one thing that's great about the military. When they make you move, they will move you. But you do have the option to do a DITY move where you can pay out of pocket and then you are reimbursed. So if you're going a short distance, it's a great idea because you can actually make a lot of money. But if you are a type of person who just doesn't deal with the stress of moving, it's great that they will have someone come out and move you.
Yeah,
so that's like my favorite thing is we always make the extra money. But the worst thing is my husband refuses to let the Army move us. So we have DITY'd every single time.
Yeah. See,
we only did partials.
We did a full DITY from Fort Hood to here. And no, because the problem with that is they're trying to like close out a base, right? Get all their stuff turned in and all this. So who do you imagine is packing the boxes and packing the truck and like doing everything? Because he literally didn't get home from base till like the night before, like, to even help with anything. And then at that point, you're having to clean the rental house or whatever you're staying in to sign out the next morning and move. And it's like, yeah, I'm not a fan of DITY. We will not do that again. Because I was like, no, I don't want to. I did all the work. This is not a benefit to me at all.
Yeah, and I always feel like anytime we've done a partial DITY, that money that we've bagged in I've never seen any of it. I feel like my husband is always like, hey, so I really want to get this like new gun part, or hey, I want to get a new bow, and I'm like, hey, I like to go to the spa. But yeah, my parents did DITY moves. Like anytime we moved stateside, I vividly remember them doing a DITY move every single time. I was never a part of it though, so I never really like saw how much work went into it because I was always visiting family during the summer, which is when most people move is during the summertime. So we didn't do it. We did do a partial DITY to Alaska and back from Alaska, which was nice because we were able to bring those things that we needed because it took a little while to get our household goods, especially having the little ones. We had Devil when we moved back from Alaska. So having all of his stuff in the back of Jeremy's truck was really nice. We didn't have to wait too long to, at least have his high chair and things like that.
Yeah, I know that totally makes sense. If we had the option of that, I think from a lot of our moves, we would have done that. But most of our moves were Oconus or back to stateside. So we didn't have the option. Like you get to pack what they let you like do that pre-box. So you get to send stuff and hope that it gets there. But generally it gets there like a week before the rest of your stuff. So you're like, well, that was super useful. And then you're out for like weeks before you even move, you're out of that stuff at your current house. So it's like, I don't know if that's super helpful in that situation. Oconus is just a whole thing.
Like it is. I vividly remember the airport going to and coming back and all of the bags that we had. And it's not like little bags. You have like the biggest suitcases that you can get, and you have all of your things stuffed in there that you will need for the next 6 months because you don't know when it's going to get there and you don't know if something's going to happen. So like, there was 3 girls in my household. So we had each a big bag and we had our like carry-ons and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember like unloading the vehicle and rolling into the airport.
Yeah, no, that's the most ridiculous thing. Yeah, everybody has their own cart. Yeah, everyone has their own cart with like 5 stacked up, and you're like, here we go. And we had a dog coming back with us, so you had to take them to a different part of the airport. And so it's like we had 10 different things. The cab that took us to the airport was like, what is happening? Like we had like a van to load all of our stuff in. It's just like, what are you doing?
I will say though, like navigating airports now as an adult and having gone through those like scenarios where moving from base to base, I'm like a pro. Like I'm like, okay, we got to go here to do this. We have to go here to this. And a bag can't be over this weight. or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's always
does.
interesting.
You learn a lot, especially living in Oconus in general, like not even just for the PCSing, but like when you fly, I mean, you fly home at least a couple times. And so you're traveling everywhere and there's 10 layovers and you get so used to being on airplanes by the time you get back to living stateside. It's crazy.
So what's everyone's favorite thing about PCSing? I know for myself, it's little adventure aspect to it. Like what is this going to bring for our family? What is this new opportunity going to do for us? When I moved to Texas, I was really nervous because we weren't moving to a military installation. We were on recruiting duty. So we were going to be north of Dallas. So I was really excited about potentially living in the civilian world. And then come to find out that I was not made for it. I was so out of my element that I was like, yep, we're a military family. I've been a military brat my entire life. And it's a little odd being outside of that realm, but I like that aspect of being able to explore a new place.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. I like look back after I move places and you don't get that same the first time you see something perspective. And you can kind of think about it. Like you're driving down that road to the first place that you went in town and you're like, oh, I remember thinking this was so great. And then you drive past it 500 times the rest of the year and you're like, oh, okay, well, it's not that great. But it's exciting because you get to see all these new places and I think that just the thought of making new friends and getting to kind of just start over every couple of years is really cool too. It's hard, but it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it can be refreshing, but it is hard.
I really like getting the new place, like having a new house and getting to have a new decorated living room and a new theme in the bathroom, just kind of a fresh start to even your house. Like, because when you pack everything, you have to clean it. So when you move, it's just like a whole fresh layout of everything.
I feel that in my soul right now because I did just move to the new house. And so I'm like, rearranging and I purged and I'm like, oh, I got a new rug for my bathroom. So it's got a new vibe. And so I do love that
purge.
Too. I got rid of so much.
Oh, I do too. I'm like, and we're moving with half of our stuff because I don't want it.
I dropped off an entire truck bed of stuff to the Salvation Army the other day. And I was just like, are you taking donations? So they're like, yes. I was like, I might need help. And I'm like,
that's
here
amazing.
you go. Yeah, I just had to get rid of everything and I've been meaning to do it. I've held on, like a lot of it was clothing though. So it wasn't stuff that I like really needed, but yeah, I bought me some new rugs. We have a playroom now. So I got to decorate a whole playroom, which we haven't had a playroom. So that was really fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, and it is exciting because it's kind of like house searching. So though like the buying process of a house is a pain, but especially if you're doing on post, you get to go look at some houses and you just get to pick which one you like and live in it. Like, I think that's so fun. And you're going to be like, oh, this will be the dreaming part. Like, this will be a great place for our couch. And this is where we're going to put our bed. And yeah, it is fun to change every time. And it's funny because Dustin and I have been talking about it. I think the reason we want to move soon, just even across town, is we're getting that like itch to be like, oh my God, we've been living here for 4 years. This is the longest we've lived anywhere in our entire marriage. And no, it's time to like go somewhere new. Like, yeah, so weird.
And it's really cool because like, especially like when you're living in different style houses in different parts of the country, you can kind of get a vibe of like what type of house you like to potentially have for your like retirement house. I've come to the conclusion that I'm not a 2-story girl. I really like ranch styles or open concept houses, where my husband, I think, tends to be more of like the 2-story, like all sleeping rooms are upstairs and like all living areas are downstairs. So it's been really, really interesting for us to kind of figure out what vibe we like and what we would potentially be looking for once we retire from the military.
Yeah. Yeah. You get to try out a lot of different things and neighborhoods too. Like you get to kind of a better feel of what neighborhoods, not like, because when you drive around them, you think, oh, this is cute, but then you get to see really like what neighborhoods feel like depending on how they are set up and stuff.
Or if you're not a neighborhood person, you're like, I need to be out in the country away from everybody and anybody.
That's me. Today we had a thing with our neighbor and I'm like, oh, I just want to go live so far away from everybody. I don't want to deal with people anymore.
It's so quiet here because at our other house, we had one side, we had dogs that lived outside all the time and they just barked all the time. And then my other neighbors recently have become very vocal and arguing, and they go outside so that way they don't disturb their kids inside, but their patio is right next to my bedroom. So, you know, they're out there at like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning arguing. So like I text Jeremy the first night we were in this house, I was like, it's so quiet. And I haven't had any issues since we've been here, and we've been here for a couple of days now. So it's been really nice to have some low key neighbors.
Yeah, for sure. Did you guys have any like PCSs that were like just so good? Like they felt like a relief to do?
I feel like all of mine have been pretty good. I really stressed moving to Alaska. When we moved from Bragg to Alaska, I really stressed there just because like I didn't know anybody who was there currently. So I didn't know anyone to like, hey, where should we live? You know, where should we not live? Things like that. So I really stressed. And I tend to like have housing available and ready to go like as soon as we get there. And I had a really good opportunity where like I found a house. It was perfect. It was out in the country for Alaska. Most places out there in the country, but this was out kind of away from Bays in a really beautiful little like neighborhood. And we had a great opportunity. We loved it there. Texas, we weren't thrilled about Texas. So I would say that was probably like our worst PCS. We didn't want to go. Jeremy definitely did not want to go to Texas. I tried to be a little bit more open-minded. I really wanted to try out the whole city living. I can state that I am not a city girl.
Yeah.
I am definitely a country girl, suburbs. I like to visit cities. I do not like living in them at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's not my jam. Yeah, I think the best part of ours was this last move to Bragg was really like, we were really glad to get out of Hood. We were in a really bad neighborhood when we moved there. People were like, oh, this is a great place to rent and whatever. And then there were like murders and drive-by shootings. And I was like, nope, I was so ready to leave that base. And then it was kind of like, that was when we did our DITY, and it was kind of annoying, the whole packing process. But then my sister volunteered to come out. So my husband and his dad drove the huge U-Haul thing and pulled his car behind it. And then me and my sister just had a road trip. And it was so enjoyable because it was the first time that we got to spend days. I mean, just days, the two of us hanging out. The kids were with us, but it was like so much fun. We got to see the whole side, the whole country from here to Texas. And it was beautiful. And so for me, that is a memory. And then it also became a tradition. So now every year we road trip with my sister. And if we hadn't done that DITY move, that wouldn't have been something that happened. So I think that was probably the coolest thing that's come out of our PCSs.
I think the most heart-wrenching one for me was moving from our first one, because I was from the area and we had been stationed there for 9.5 years. So to pack up a house that we've been living in for, almost a decade, and then moving away from my family on top of that one was, really hard for me. But once we got on base and all the neighbors come around to meet us and, was like, oh, let our kids play with your kids while they unpack, and, really nice. That was kind of the best experience for me, was being welcomed as soon as we got there.
Yeah, your PCS journey is like so different. I feel like because you did the opposite. Instead of like lots of rapid moves and then kind of settle into a base, you had to do it the other way. And it would be really hard to be settled down and then have to all of a sudden start moving around.
Yeah, that would be really hard to do, especially like being stuck for someplace for 9 years, and then not only moving then, but like you guys have kind of consistently move in short spurts since then. Mm-hmm. That would be really annoying for sure.
We were only there at Rucker for maybe 1.5 years, and then they sent him straight to a hardship tour. So I moved back home again. And then 1 year later, we went to Campbell. And so that was our first, I say real PCS, because it was a longer distance. We were going together. So that was interesting. We did that one fairly well.
Well, I know that there's some good, but there's generally a lot more stories of the bad things that happen during PCS. So let's go and hear those. Let's hear what you got, because I have some good ones too.
All right, I've got a bad one. So we were trying to get out of Rucker. My husband had to get some paperwork signed or clear something. The lady came, cleared our housing. Everything was clean. We were good to go. We packed the cats, the dog, the kids, all of our stuff. We get down there to have this paper signed, and they cannot sign it for like 4 hours. So we literally sat outside of this building with the cats, the dog, the kids, everything, waiting for one signature.
Oh my
It
gosh.
was miserable. We were so frustrated.
No, to say the least. I like, what are you supposed to do with cats and dogs? Like, they don't want to be sitting in a cage. Like, what an awful, awful. Oh my God.
Well, we had the U-Haul, the vehicles, everything packed, just sitting in that parking lot waiting for them to give us the okay to go.
That's insane. Yeah, that sucks so bad. Say, I have two different ones, so I'll tell one, and I'll let Ashley tell a couple. So obviously, we kind of talked about it before, but when we moved from Schofield over to Germany, I was 36 weeks pregnant. Why my doctor was like, okay, go. He signed a thing, and nobody along the whole trip ever asked for that piece of paper. Nobody questioned it. But we had to do a layover in Maryland, and we were there for 3 days. So they paid for the hotel and all that. But while we were there, we got food poisoning, like really bad food poisoning, to this point, my husband, and that was like, what? My daughter will be 9 tomorrow. So almost 10 years ago, like, whatever, it was forever ago. And he still doesn't eat Chinese food because of that one situation. We were so sick and then had to fly like the next day. It was like the most miserable thing. And then we get to Germany, don't speak German at all, and so we get put in because the hotel on base was full, we got put in a German hotel. Couldn't talk to the people there. We had to figure out how to do their breakfast buffet, all that on our own. We had to figure out transportation because we're also not on base and we don't have our car. So we're like, this is just awful. And so we had to also, because of being pregnant, find a German doctor and start going downtown for the doctor's appointments. So it was crazy. And then I ended up having her. She was a week late, but we ended up having her and not having any of our furniture, not having any of our stuff. She came home to an empty house. Like, yeah, don't move when you're 36 weeks pregnant. The problem is they told us, you either move with your husband now or you stay here and have your child and then move once she's 3 months old and can move. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to have my first baby on an island away from my family by myself and then stay there for 3 more months for the first 3 months alone. I was like, that's not happening. That would be a really terrible choice to make. So
yeah, I mean, that's the really sucky thing about military life is, the mission comes first. And so things like that, they don't really care about. And, I just had an incident with a spouse who was having labor while her husband was at JRTC. And she was just like, is he going to get to come home? And I was like, probably not. I was like, unless you have like a severe case, they're not going to just take him out of the field right now. But yeah, that sounds absolutely miserable.
Yeah, it was not a great time for that
at all.
That was like our first actual PCS, and we also, it was our first PCS. Nobody told us what we should have brought with us. Granted, we should have brought the crib and stuff, found a way to bring that on the plane, but nobody told us that stuff. We were all babies, and so we just had a pack and play, and then we were on. The good thing about moving Oconus is they do generally give you rental furniture, so you have somewhere, you're not on an air mattress like you would be stateside moving places toys, but it's like a rock. You're sleeping on this terrible rock mattress that 20,000 other people have probably used. And it's just
yeah, it's definitely not the comfiest stuff.
No, not at all.
I remember that furniture moving over to Europe too.
Yeah. So it was just not a good time at all, the whole move. And it was nice once our stuff came, but of course our stuff came while I'm holding an infant, and I couldn't unpack. We were just stuck in slow motion. When he was off work, he could help pack and stuff. But
yeah, I really wish that the Army would be a little bit better, or the military in general would be a little bit better about sponsorships. Usually you are assigned a sponsor, but it's really up to that sponsor whether or not they're actually going to do what they need to do. But it's also your responsibility to reach out to that sponsor too. And if you at least have that information and, be like, hey, what do I need to do? This is what's happening. Can you get this information for me? And again, a lot of young spouses might not know that, but now with Facebook and social media, you can go on and ask these questions. And I feel like it's really great. Growing up, at least for my mom and stuff, I don't I don't know how she did it. Like, I really don't remember all of the details moving over, because I was in the 6th grade when we did our first tour in Europe going into 6th grade. So I don't remember much of the details. I mean, I remember sleeping on the furniture you talked about, and it took a long time for us to get our stuff. I think we didn't have our stuff for like 3.5 months.
Yeah, it takes a
maybe
very
close to
long
4.
time.
It took a while. And then once we got it, you know, we were already like in school and things like that. So like, you know, we were just going about our daily lives. But for someone who's new to the military life, first PCS going overseas, like that could be,
Well, and
it's
like
just
you're
put that
saying,
taste in
that's
your
the
mouth.
sponsorship thing is there, but I feel like it ends up being more just for the soldier. You know, the soldier gets there and the sponsor's there. They pick him up at the airport, which we get that part, and then they help with the in processing, but they didn't help on our side hardly at all. And I know when we were leaving, our sponsor, whoever he was at the end, like that was supposed to help take us to the airport, didn't show up. So we had to call a cab, and it's just like they, like you said, it falls on them to be responsible. And if they don't feel like it's something they need to do, unfortunately, it kind of becomes a thing where you have to have friends. And luckily, you know, you do make friends quickly, but it's just that program is something that it's good to try to reach out to, and you may get lucky where you find someone that really does. Like, I've heard good stories where people, they have them over for dinner like every day of the week, the first week they're there, and, you know, help them adjust, but it's not always the case either.
Yeah. I really do think the social media nowadays is a great resource, especially when you're moving to different installations and you utilize them. I think we've discussed this in other podcasts about, you know, reaching out and asking questions and doing your research, and, you know, make sure you're doing your due diligence and your own research, and not just going with what the person says. Again, it's just really important in the military life. You have to kind of research and kind of take things in your own hands and not leave it to someone to tell you what to do.
Oh yeah. And I think the only reason we survived those first few weeks was because that, like I told you when we were talking about friends, is that girl who reached out and like took me to appointments, because I would have never been able to figure out how to get downtown. Like, I didn't know the bus systems. I'd have ended up, you know, in a different town or something wild. So it makes a difference.
I just assumed you would go to the military hospital there. But then now that I think about it, I was at K-Town. So I think about that because that's right next to Launchstoel. So that's where we went to any type of medical appointment. So I didn't even think about that at other installations over in Europe.
Yeah, we were definitely like, it was only like maybe 3 hours, but yeah, it was too far for a baby. So.
Yeah. No
I know that, like, if you had surgeries or stuff, you would go to Launchstoel. I know that I went with one of my friends for her son to have a surgery. And so it was most medical things, I think they send you there. But if it's something dire, yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have too many worse things, like other than the run of the mill, like, you know, delayed flights. Like, you know, one time when we went overseas, we had our plane broke down, like one of the engines was not working correctly. So we had to land in Maryland and we had to stay overnight. You know, my mom was always the type of person, like when we were moving, she would give up our seats to get the free airline tickets, which I hated. I hated it so much because you would take like already a really long trip and make it like 10 times longer. I remember when we were moving to Texas. So when we were stationed in Texas with my dad, we were only there for a year, and she did that. And I was like, Mom, I was like, I can't do this. I was like, you can give your seat and Katie's seat up, but I was like, I gotta go. Like, if I'm not out of this airport right now, like, it's not going to be good.
Oh, yeah, because you end up like sitting. I remember in Maryland when we were like waiting for Space A spots, it was like you're just sitting in an airport for hours and hours. Yeah.
Hours. I think like my most stressful one was when we had to PCS to Texas. So we weren't supposed to PCS. Jeremy came down on recruiting duty, and because it's considered an OCONUS duty station, recruiting, you don't typically move to your duty station until after you go to school. But because if you're OCONUS, they send you beforehand. So he wasn't supposed to go to school until January, like mid-January. And they ended up moving us to Texas at the beginning of his report date was October 1st. So we found out that he got orders for recruiting in end of July. Then they told us in August that he would have to report July 1st. So I think that was really stressful to me because I had just gotten a really cool promotion at work. And I had just gone back to full-time work because Devlin was only 6 months at the time. I had just had Devlin earlier that year. And so I was just finally getting back into the groove, and I had again, promotion full time. And then they're like, yep, we're going to have to pack you out in 30 days. So it was a very quick, very fast PCS, which happens, and you kind of have to just roll with the punches. But I didn't like that at all.
Yeah,
I didn't like how I couldn't plan it. I couldn't plan our trip. I just didn't have time to. So that was the worst. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other bad thing that we had was when we did move to Texas, so coming back from Germany, I don't think they really have a sponsorship thing because, you know, you're moving back to the States, but it was someone in his command was supposed to pick us up. We landed at like 2:00 in the morning. You know, it was like super late. We had both kids. One was 3, one was 6 months old. We had a dog, and we're at the airport and nobody showed up. And so there was this other van that had come through, this big van that was, and there were a few other soldiers that were on our flight. And so we had to hitch a ride with these soldiers in this van, and they like loaded all of our stuff up and took us to the hotel on base because nobody showed up for us. And we were just like sitting there at the airport, and we're like, okay, what are we even supposed to do? We have, 1,500 bags, a dog, kids, like just kind of stuck there. But luckily they just kind of moved their stuff out of the way and did it. But yeah, it was like, oh, this is awesome way to start our tour here. Great. Thank you.
We haven't had any stories like that.
Yeah. Well, not everyone does.
Yeah. My husband did come home from a training one time. They all flew in, and all of a sudden he's like, pick me and 2 other guys up. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Thankfully, I cleaned out my vehicle and all the car seats, because when I got there, he had picked up another person. I was like, who's this? And he was like, well, he was just kind of standing there needing a ride back to base. Like, okay, so that was really awkward being squished in between random people, but we were there to help. So hopefully spouses or soldiers that have a situation like that, like Sabrina, y'all were able to find a ride. Hopefully they can find a ride, because my husband always spots the other military person that needs help. Like, he can tell when somebody's standing there.
Yeah, I feel like
and reaches out.
The military community is great for that. Like last year when I went to Fort Hood and was training and our flight got canceled, and I was like, no way, I'm not paying for another night at a hotel, because they were like, oh, you can stay the night and fly the next day. I was like, no way. So they're like, well, the other option is to fly through Austin, but you have to get to Austin. And I was like, but luckily there was another military couple that they were doing the same things. They were trying to get back to Bragg. And I was like, oh, I'm going with you to Austin. And they were like, okay, come on, right along. My husband was like, you got in a car with strangers? Like, oh, military, like, it's fine.
Jeremy totaled his car the day before we were supposed to leave for Alaska, because he was driving it down to the harbor. So to ship his vehicle, and we were driving mine up here because I had an SUV, and he totaled his. So I always feel like there's also like the craziest things can happen right before you PCS too. Like, everything breaks in your house before you are, to sign out or paint everything. So yeah, he totaled his. I'm so glad I didn't go with him. I made his buddy drive my car and follow him, and I'm so glad I didn't go to that.
Yeah, I think most of my horror stories just come from the OCONUS side. OCONUS deployment or PCSs are so different. Like if you've done just like stateside, OCONUS is a whole other thing. Like your cars, like shipping your cars, you have to detail your car. And I mean, you have to get it paid detailing of your car, because if there's a speck of dust, they will tell you no, and you will have to go back and re-get your car clean, because they will not let you put that car on there unless it's like in perfect condition. So that's a huge hassle, and you have to pay for all that. Like, yeah, moving, and especially if you have pets, moving OCONUS is also not very fun, because you have to go to different parts of the airport to ship your dog. And then in between at your layovers, you have to pick up your dog at the gate, move him to the next airplane with you, and then they put him back on the plane. And it's like, it doesn't go with your luggage like everything else. You have to go get your dog in between.
And it depends on where you go too, whether you have to quarantine your dog too. There's certain places where you have to quarantine your dog for like 30 days before you can even bring them with you. So there is a lot more that does go into an OCONUS.
Yeah, and you are without furniture for so long. Especially, we went from Hawaii to Germany, so you're thinking that stuff had to go like across the United States, and then get on another boat and go across the ocean, and then get to Germany. So you're without stuff for so long. Yeah, they'll do that.
If you like books, they will be your friends. I read so many books. Like again, when I lived over in Europe, I was middle school, high school, and that's when Harry Potter came out. So that was the year, like that was when like every summer Harry Potter would come out with the new book. And so, yep, Harry Potter was my BFF through every single move. I would buy it and I would wait until we moved and would read it.
Yeah, when we moved to Germany, we brought our laptop and we started watching Game of Thrones. So we had nothing else to do. I mean, you get your internet set up when you're there, and then all you have is whatever you brought with you. So it's like not really anything. And you always forget stuff because you're like, oh, I'll be okay for a couple weeks. No, you won't be, because it's a long time.
Can you do like Netflix and Hulu and things like that overseas? Like when I was growing up, we didn't have anything. So we didn't have TV. Like we could pay for cable, but it was like through like England. So it was a lot of English channels. So there wasn't a lot of like stateside stuff. So like my parents were just like, nope, we're not having TV. Like you're just going to have to watch movies, VHS tapes. Oh, God, I'm so old.
Yeah, they had TV. They also have like a military channel. So you get kind of like it broadcasts for free some of the like news and some like kids shows. But then we were able to do Netflix.
Catchy tunes.
Oh yeah, that are repetitive. Yeah, and have the stupidest commercials in between where you're like, oh, we're getting like military commercials here in between. Different. That's super weird. But we could get Netflix, but not the same things you get in America. So you get like the German Netflix because your IP is German. So it's still like a lot of American shows, like English shows, but there's some things that you can't get because it's like not allowed in Germany and stuff like that. So
I was curious because like it's been so long since I've lived overseas. I mean, it's been over 15 years. So last time I was over in Europe. So
yeah, Germany has some weird media restrictions. So especially like YouTube, if you're trying to like watch music videos and stuff, a lot of them you can't watch because it's just not copyright, or I don't really know exactly what it is, what the rule is there, but something weird there.
So we've talked about memorable. We've talked about our favorite things, the worst things that's kind of happened to us. What would be something that you would try differently on your next PCS that you might have not done previously?
I probably wouldn't do a DITY again. I can tell you that was just too much work for me. I'm all about the like, come to my house, put it in a box and bye. Like, then you just drive or fly to where you're going. For me, that was so much easier. So
I don't really have anything. I mean, all of our DITYs went fairly well. I will say helping my husband help move everything was tough.
Kim, when your husband did hardships, did you ever consider staying at the base that you were at the time?
We were there for school. So a lot of the people were just going through flight school when we were there. So I had the option to stay, but we were only 2 hours from home. So we just packed up and went back home.
I know that's like a topic I hear all the time, though, is a lot of spouses like, well, my husband's is going to be deployed. Should I stay here or should I go home? And I know that's a hard choice for a lot of people, especially younger people.
Well, it is a hard choice. And then too, you also have to make the choice of moving back in with your parents. A lot of people will move back in with their parents to save money, especially with little children. So that was one of the decisions that kind of helped us too, is having help with our two youngest.
Yeah, for
sure. Like those situations, you have to do what's best for you. Like I say that I would never move back home, but if like Jeremy had to leave for like a year and a half for whatever reason, like I would move home. I wouldn't move in with my parents. I would find some place to live close by. But that's just because that's where my job is. And so it would just be nice that, we could go up there and work for an entire year and a half and not have to worry about going back and forth. But, it's really hard to say like what you're going to not do and do on your next PCS because every place you go is different. So, if you're staying stateside, you're going to do one thing. If you're going to go Oconus, you're going to do another. But even stateside, like, if we moved to if we ever had to go back to Texas again, like I would definitely not purchase or buy or rent a house without seeing it in person. I wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, there's different things that I would do depending on where I go.
Oh, yeah. I think just having a hardship tour is hard in general because not only are you preparing for them to go for a year, but you're preparing for them to live a whole separate life basically away from you. So you're dividing everything in your house into what he needs versus what I need, versus we did move in with my parents. So what went into storage? And I think that just having to make those decisions on top of him leaving was really hard, and just overall.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've never
I wouldn't
had to
wanna
do
move.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been through a hardship tour. Like even with my dad did stay over in Europe my senior year. So my senior year we came back stateside so I could get in because I wanted to go to school here in North Carolina. So we moved back here to go so I could get in-state tuition. But my younger sister is on the spectrum, so they were really trying to keep her in steady through all 4 years of high school and one high school. So she was starting as a freshman. So my dad had stayed over because he had to do 1 year at a different military base in Europe. And then he was coming back to Bragg afterwards. So that was the only kind of experience I have with a hardship tour. But like me personally, like just the thought of having to move twice in a year.
Well,
like
and
I
then
told
we bought
Jeremy,
a
I was like,
house in
we're
the
not
middle of
moving
that
again.
too.
Like I was like, we are not moving again until we have to PCS. I was like, this was too much work. Like I'm exhausted. My body hurts.
I've moved twice now in the middle of Travis being gone.
No.
So I moved in with my parents during the hardship tour. We bought a house, so we moved into that house. And then just recently he was in Savannah and I moved back and forth, but he was here to help me on the weekends. So that really helped.
Yeah, I told Jeremy I'm not doing this again without him. Like, and we only moved 8 minutes up the road. So it's not even like we moved like very far, but I'm so thankful that I had family that's close by that was able to come help me. I have no idea what would have happened if we were at a different installation and I did not have family to come help me. I mean, I'm sure I could have wrangled some friends into it. Unfortunately, I usually make some really good friends at each base that we go to, but this was a lot of work. And you know, for those who make that decision to move home while your spouse is deployed, just know that it's a lot of work. And especially if you're doing with kids, like mine are 6 and 3 on almost 3. And that was hard enough, like moving with just 2 young kids. So I couldn't imagine if you have more than that or younger than that.
I mean, you're transitioning.
you.
Yeah, you're having to transition schools and stuff if your kids are older. Like that, it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
and
we have to change schools.
Being away from your family is hard, but sometimes it's kind of nice to have that independence too, though. So if if you're at a duty station, you're kind of questioning it. I feel like think about that because it's hard to be apart, but it's also kind of nice to have the independence where you're like, yeah, but this is my home. I don't need to move back to something else just because I'm alone. I can do it, get through it. It's just a year. I mean, some people's deployments are a year. So, and it just kind of depends on where you are in your life. And I know that that's also the same with moving Oconus. You don't have to move with them. They can make that a hardship tour where you stay where you were stationed. But that's also, some people just aren't meant to move across into other countries. And that can be a decision you can make too. I mean, if you're just, especially places like Korea or Japan, that's a huge culture. Like that's a big culture change. And that might just not be something that's for you or something for your kids. So I know it's a decision you have to make.
It just depends on your situation, because I had the opportunity to move back home when I was pregnant with my 4th and have the baby at home with family while Travis was gone. But I chose to stay in Clarksville because of the same reason. My children, having them stay on their schedule was easier than pulling everything back to Georgia just for a few months. So we ended up staying so that the kids could stay in school, stay on their routine. And it actually worked out a lot easier than if I would have came home.
Yeah,
so it just depends on your kids too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that'll also, like you're talking about your sister being on the spectrum, like you may not be able to move to places because of that too. So they have to be certain counselors and certain things that they have to be access to. So yeah, like you were saying, it kind of just depends on your opinion on that type of thing. So what are some tips that you guys have? I know that if you guys listened to the last podcast when we talked to my ultimate PCS, we had some really good tips, but I'm sure there are more and wonderful things. We were talking about it earlier today. Don't use those sticky things on your wall, especially if you're in a rental, because that's not always a great idea. That pulls paint and it's not a good idea.
Yeah, we had those removable decals in Devlin's room, and they're supposed to be removable, and majority of it removed off. So I really do think it was just the wall in his room. But yeah, there's parts of it where it came down to the drywall. So we're going to be doing some patchwork this weekend. I love that trash bag tip. So I totally utilize that trash bag tip from my PCS. Total game changer. Like, even if we PCS and someone moves us, like, I'm still going to go through and wrap everything up in the trash bags because it was so easy to put it up and take it off and nothing fell down. It was great. I loved it.
Yeah. And I talked about the Ziplocs and that. I mean, just especially your drawers in your kitchen, just labeling them what drawer they go in. And then you don't even have to unpack them. You just don't have to unpack them because you could just shove them in the drawer with the bag and you're ready to go until you have time to unpack them. So that was awesome.
My thing is boxes. We always, when we did a DITY, we would just get any and every box that we could find. The last time we PCS, we actually went and bought boxes that were the same size. So they stacked in the U-Haul perfectly. Like, there was a mismatch box. So we can shove something in here. It was nice because all the boxes fit in there. And with 4 kids, we needed all the room that we can get. And then our little trick for our DITY moves is my husband always packs the mirrors in between the mattresses, and it saves them every time, thankfully. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
Have a broken mirror.
Well, and I think if you are always going to do a DITY move, like, you could always hang on to those boxes, like flat them out and store them in your garage, because boxes are expensive. Like, thankfully, like, if you're in a military community, someone always has boxes. So you can just be like, hey, who has boxes? I didn't have to buy a single box. Like, I picked up boxes from 2 separate individuals and I didn't even have to use all of them. Like, I still have like an entire pack of like boxes sitting on the garage floor.
If you're going to be moving, make the investment in them, because we just lined our attic with them. And then when we were ready to move again, just taped them right back up.
Yeah, if you're going to stay active duty and be knowing you're PCSing on a regular basis, it's definitely worth having them because then you have them for the whole time. And the same thing with like when you buy electronics, keep the box because it's got like the perfect pieces to keep your TV, your computer safe. Keep those boxes. And it's funny because now we're probably not moving that up frequent anymore, but we still have in the shed, we just have all the boxes to everything. And it does. It saves you so much time if you have the right size box already to just shove that stuff into, and then it's more likely to survive moves. So
and those hanger boxes are worth it. The
they
hanger
look
boxes,
cool.
they are super. And then in the bottom, you can always pack, your shoes, or I would always put the smaller picture frames down in there with blankets and towels, because then you're using the bottom of the box and the hanger part.
Well, I think, like, again, like, the biggest tip that I can give to anyone who's PCSing is reach out to those other military spouse groups on Facebook and, ask your questions and then do your research from there. I mean, thankfully, we're in that modern day age of where you have Facebook and you have all those tools at your fingertips. So, I mean, that's probably my biggest tip on PCSing is, you're going to Fort Carson, go add yourself to all the Fort Carson pages. You're going to Fort Rucker or Fort Hood, like, go ahead and add yourself to those pages and just ask for advice. I mean, worst case scenario, no one answers. Best case scenario, you're going to get all these great tips and have what you need to go and do your own research.
And groups like that aren't specific to your base. So even like our Hearts Connected, or I know there's a couple other military spouse groups that I'm in that are just for the entire country are great too, because even if those people aren't there anymore, they still know those areas. So if you're not getting a whole lot of response at your local base pages, you could always reach out and be like, hey, was anybody at Carson recently? I'm moving there. What's a good neighborhood? So those are also really good.
There's also an actual PCS page that a lot of people refer to when people ask about moving. I don't know the name of it exactly, but
we'll link it.
There's a Pacific PCS page. I think another good tip is, if you're buying a house and not moving on base, make sure that spouse is familiar with the military lifestyle, because if she or he is, then they will help you hopefully navigate around base, navigate around the area, tell you what's a good part of the town, not good part of the town.
get a lot of opinions on that before you rent, because like I said, Hood, we were told that this neighborhood was good, and I think it had been. I think that it was one of the newer ones a few like 5 or 10 years before that. So a lot of people were saying that, but it wasn't anymore when we moved there. And so we got the lovely experience of living there for 3 years and just dealing with all the drama that included. So
yeah.
Our first house, we didn't have a military person or person that was associated with the military. So we bought a house, and then now like we still have that house because we will never be able to get rid of it because of the area and everything else. So it's kind of a house that we're stuck with. So you really want to make sure that you know the area and the person that you're buying the home from.
Yeah. I don't know that I would buy right away.
Yeah, I feel like you have to go, if you're going to buy a home and you're in it, military communities are not always the safest communities. It's a transit town. And so you have people coming and going. So it's very easy for those people who are not of savory characters to be coming and going. You know, Fayetteville is not the greatest place. I don't like Fayetteville itself, but I love Bragg's location. Like, I love that I can go to the beach, and I can go to the mountains in a short time. I know I'm very close to going down to like Georgia, Savannah, Florida, DC. So like you kind of have to have an open mind too as well on where you're going. Like, you know, lately I've seen a lot of places like, please tell me that there's more to do in this area. I'm like, well, yeah, you just have to get out and go look for it. But yeah, like buying houses, like we love where we live. We're out in the country, but it doesn't have the best school system. And so like, you know, my mom is always like, you need to get into a better school system. Like, well, you're right. But I'm also, okay, the houses in that better school system are a lot more. Not necessarily we can afford those houses, especially the rent. You have to make do with what you have as well. So buying a house, you definitely have to know that resale value for sure.
Yeah, I would recommend renting or like staying on base and getting to know the neighborhoods, because just because someone liked it or had a good experience doesn't mean that that's going to be for you. And buying a house is a huge thing, and it's a huge step, especially if you still have the possibility of PCSing. So then you're going to have this house where you're going to have to rent it or find something else to do with it. So I would, don't buy right away. That's really, you can get yourself into some bad situations, I would imagine, doing that.
Well, and again, you have to do your due diligence and you have to do your own research. You can't just go with what someone says on a Facebook form. I'm a firm believer. Like, I feel like if you're going to buy a house, like you have to come visit the area yourself. Like if you want to have a house bought before you get there, you have to pay and travel here to look at it. If you're not going to do that, I mean, at least have someone you know well enough to be able to give you an honest opinion. Go look at the house in person in the area for yourself. Like, you know, when I was looking for houses here to rent, when we found out we had to move, this lady sent me this super cute house, you know, pictures and all that kind of stuff. And I finally was just like, well, can you send me the address so I can like drive by or at least know the area? And so when I Googled it, I was like, okay, well, it's not too bad. But then when I drove over there, I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not moving into this neighborhood. Like, you know, now that I've driven over here, I realize like one street over, not good. So, and you know, I'm home alone a lot and I have 2 young kids. So, you know, and we're outside a lot too. So I was like, nope, like super cute, right in my price range, but not happening.
I know, even like with the house we first bought, it wasn't in a bad neighborhood. It was a brand new neighborhood. The problem is the second and third phases of the neighborhood were 2-story, 3-story homes. So it wasn't that it was a bad neighborhood. It was just somebody else came in and built bigger and better in that area. So I feel like sometimes even if you do your research, you still may encounter those issues. Just like here, we bought our house because of the school. We wanted this school in the middle school that we chose. And I just got a letter from the elementary school saying that we were being rezoned.
Yep,
So,
and that can happen.
You know, you just got to be prepared either way and make the best of it. I mean, do your research, but also know that
how to roll
you got to
with the
be
punches.
open-minded.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel
I
like
mean,
that
it is
needs
the
to be your
military life.
motto. That has to be your motto as a military spouse. You just have to roll with the punches. Some things you are not going to like. You're going to absolutely hate them to your core. But I'm sorry, sister. It's just gonna happen that way.
And you have to make the best of it. Like, Hood was awful. We lived in a terrible neighborhood, but you know what? I made a couple friends in our neighborhood, so we knew we could just get in the van together and we go to better places so we could go walk and stuff. And it is what it is. But you have to make the best of it. Even though we hated Hood the entire 3 years that we were there, we had amazing friends and we had movie nights and things that we did all the time. So it's an adjustment. And I would also consider looking at neighborhoods outside of the base, like further away. Like, yes, there's the commute issue, but at least they're generally better neighborhoods too once you get out of the vicinity. Because I know Killeen was just not, you didn't want to live in Killeen when you're in Texas.
Well, and if you are totally open to like the commute, then go for it. I mean, we have, there's several people here who are stationed at Bragg that live in Southern Pines or Cameron, places like that. And they make it totally work. Where you have people who are like, nope, I'm going to live 5 minutes right outside the gate because I do not want a long commute. And that's A-okay. You just have to, make those appropriate accommodations on how you are going to handle being in a not as a nice area, but I don't know. I feel like that's no matter where you live, you're going to have that type of thing. Like Alaska has a really high crime rate. I never really felt unsafe there. Now I wouldn't go downtown by myself, but I wouldn't go downtown by myself anywhere. So, especially at night, like I'm always always aware of my surroundings. So you just have to, be prepared.
Yeah, I think that's the best tip is plan, schedule, think about, plan for what you want and then expect it to not go that way and be able to just deal with it because that's the military life. It's not going to go the way you think it's going to go. It's going to go the exact opposite most of the time. And
if a surprise can happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And it's just, you have to embrace it because that's the only way you're gonna survive it is if you embrace it, because the people who don't are miserable and you don't want to be miserable. It is a fun life. I've loved it. And I wouldn't trade anything that we've done.
I totally agree with you. Like I said, like living in Texas where we weren't in the military community, I was so out of my element, and knowing the community that I receive in a military community, even if I'm not connected to the military community itself, like our first duty station, I really didn't know a lot of people within the military because I had friends outside of the military, the people I worked with because we were here prior to him joining. Even then, like there was still an understanding of our lifestyle. It is a very different lifestyle. And so you have to roll with the punches and expect a surprise and expect things aren't going to go your way. You're going to have to, there's a very good chance that you might have to deliver a baby by yourself. There's a good chance that you might have to move by yourself. There's a good chance that, your husband could rapidly deploy twice in 6 months. It could happen, and don't think it's not going to happen, because when you least expect something like that, it's most likely going to happen. I never in a million years thought that we would ever deal with a rapid deployment. So, let alone 2 in 6 months. So it happens, and we were like, cool, we're going to handle this. We got this. And we made the best of it, and we didn't get down about it, and we handled it really well. And so, if you don't handle that very well, not only are you going to make yourself miserable, you're going to make your soldier miserable. You're going to make your kids miserable, and you're going to make your friends miserable because they're going to hear you vent. It's okay to vent, not saying it's not, but you have to just take a deep breath and say, this is the lifestyle that we chose because you did choose it. I feel like a lot of military spouses complain about that. You did choose to marry someone who's in the military, and that kind of comes along with their job. It's not like a civilian job where they can just say, I'm calling out sick for today because, you're sick. Like, it's just not something that happens. So you have to kind of go with the territory.
Yeah,
for sure.
I agree. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you guys joined us. Anything, of course, that we've talked about, we'll make sure that we have links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this on any of our streaming places, it should be in the show notes at that location. So we'll have all the notes of it we've talked about, and you can reach us, of course, on Facebook at Deployed Love. So we'd love to talk to you, hear your insight as far as PCSing. I want to hear your horror stories. So I know we've all got them. We've got something that's happened. So I'm going to make a post in our Hearts Connected. So on Monday when this goes live, come on to our Hearts Connected and join us and our conversation about that. So otherwise, I hope that you guys have a great end of March, and Ruck up, Buttercup. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.